WPLG 715, Fireman Kenny's on the air, helping you to stay safe in a world where danger never takes a vacation. On this episode of the Fireman Kenny Show Podcast, we interview Mike Bongiorno and Glen Colwell from Anew Advisors about National Financial Planning Month. Welcome back to all 12 of our loyal listeners to another installment of the Fireman Kenny Show Podcast. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Fireman Kenny Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or whatever platform you're listening to the show. The Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards has declared October as National Financial Planning Month. Lack of financial planning can be a community risk, and promoting healthy finances helps to make a healthy community. On this episode, we interview Mike Bongiorno and Glen Colwell from Anew Advisors about the importance of financial planning. Before we begin the podcast, we would like to mention our sponsors. For over a century, the National Fire Sprinkler Association has been advocating for a stronger industry and a safer world by promoting fire sprinklers in model codes and legislation. Their mission is simple: to protect lives and property from fire through the widespread acceptance of the fire sprinkler concept. Be sure to follow the National Fire Sprinkler Association on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. You can visit the National Fire Sprinkler Association website, www.nfsa.org. We would also like to thank our friends at Fire Suppression Solutions, distributor of fire suppression products for the fire service and for home use. You can follow Fire Suppression Solutions on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Now a word from Fire Suppression Solutions.
Fire can strike without warning, leaving you with precious little time to react. And if you are not prepared, the damage can be devastating to life and property. In the blink of an eye, your home or business could be on fire, with flames doubling in size every 30 seconds, leaving you helpless and unable to respond. Don't let this nightmare become a reality. That starts with being prepared. Our fire suppression products are designed to equip you with an effective response to any fire emergency, all while limiting additional damage, making you the true first responder, giving you the peace of mind that you have what you need to keep your loved ones and property safe until more help comes. Do you have a plan to respond to a fire emergency at your home or business? Protect your family, pets, and property with the tools from Fire Suppression Solutions. Contact us today and finish putting your plan into effect before it's too late.
For more information on Fire Suppression Solutions products, you can visit firess.us. Welcome back to all 12 of our loyal listeners to another installment of the Fireman Kenny Show. We're here today with Glen Colwell and Mike Bongiorno from Anew Advisors, talking about financial planning as a community risk. Glen and Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kenny.
Very much.
Yeah, thanks, Kenny, for having us. I'm Glen Colwell, Managing Director of Anew Advisors, 26 years in the business of investment advising, and very happy to be here.
Kenny, I'm retired from the City of Milwaukee Fire Department. I served 28 years. I was involved in the union my entire career. Last 4 years of my career, I was a union president. And now in retirement, work for Anew Advisors.
So we became acquainted through Anew Advisors since West Bend Firefighters Local 2025 is using Anew as our investment vehicle. Why don't we talk about Anew Advisors and what you guys actually do?
Great, thanks, Kenny. Yeah, we made a specific business model to serve first responders on multiple levels. So either on a state level or a local level, as well as an individual firefighter member level. And it was really born out of understanding exactly what each level needed. And as we evolved through our business model, we're able to give advice to each of those different levels.
So since October is Financial Planning Awareness Month, and I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who do not have a written financial plan or do not even understand what financial planning actually is, why don't we talk about what financial planning actually is?
Yeah, thanks, Kenny. I think financial planning, the term is often just a general term, and very rarely is it really understood. If you really break down what financial planning is to look at somebody's overall plan that not only includes investments, but it includes insurance, it includes estate planning, includes budgeting. So there's various components to a true financial plan, and very rarely do you understand all the moving parts that you may need to either affect or plan for throughout your life. So that's a pretty general term, but understanding it needs to break down into 4 or 5 different areas.
And my experience in the fire service is that fire departments across the country are so young nowadays, and the people that are getting on are just so excited about getting their dream job and are enthusiastic about being good at their job. They're not really worried about a lot of things, and they don't understand what their pension is. They don't understand the benefit of the 457. They don't understand getting that retiree health care paid for, right? When getting that health care paid for when they're in their retirement years. So they don't know what they don't know, and that's kind of why we're here.
So when we're talking about deferred compensation and financial planning for someone's future, and we've got the 401ks, the 403bs, the 457 plans, there's a number of different IRAs, traditional and Roth, as well as estate planning. Why don't we talk about why it's very important to consider the future and consider what you're going to need in your future when you're not making as much money after retirement?
That's a great question, Kenny. I'm just going to reflect back a little bit upon this morning. For us, which was unique, we taught a class at the Waltz for the Professional Firefighters of Wisconsin, which covered this very topic for members on an individual level. So building a financial plan doesn't need to be complicated, but you need some key components to understand. You all have a pension and how valuable that is, and very rarely do you understand how does that pension work in conjunction with your 457. You have a 457. You may or may not be married. You'll have spousal accounts. You'll have IRAs. You may own a side business. I don't know how many firefighters I hear have side businesses, right? So you may have rental income. So there's all these components to your financial life that you need to just take a step back and build an overall picture of. Whether you want to call that a financial plan or we call it a roadmap is irrelevant. It's just you need to take that step and actually put everything down and understand which direction you're going.
So some of the problems that people may have is being financially illiterate and not understanding, let's say, the mortgages. And we had the financial collapse in 2008, started actually in 2004 with the adjustable rate mortgages. And when those mortgages had finally reset, then the mortgage industry collapsed. And a lot of people, there may be people who don't care how much something costs. They only want to know what their monthly payments are. So let's talk about issues with mortgages, revolving debts such as credit cards, auto loans, and student loans. What should people be looking for, and how can they adjust their lifestyle to not get into trouble with any debt?
That's a pretty broad question, Kenny. I would take a step back and get really granular about this and really simplistic at the same time. Debt can be good and debt can be bad. Right? And so you need to understand, if you're going to take on a debt, what is the goal of that debt? Is it to buy something that is eventually going to be a long-term asset and either appreciate or produce income? That's what I would define as good debt. Or is it a bad debt where you're going to be paying a monthly payment or a compounding interest rate that might change in the future on an asset or a good or a service that you're buying that won't produce income in the future or won't appreciate at a greater rate than inflation? If you just stood there and understood that between good debt and bad debt, it would change the landscape for you and your financial outcomes over years to come. So good debt, taking out a loan to buy a rental property, great debt. Bad debt, credit card debt to go buy a vacation, right? So there's good debt and bad debt. If it produces an acquisition of an asset that produces income or appreciates past inflation, good debt. If it's a reoccurring monthly bill or an annual bill that doesn't keep up with inflation and you're not buying an asset, that's bad debt. And so we see all different types of debt and making sure you categorize that in your financial picture.
Kenny, I got an example. We do training in police departments and fire departments. An example, a police chief came to us before we did a presentation and said, in everything that you're talking about, could you just please mention that they shouldn't buy a truck within the first 90 days of them being hired? Because I have police officers knocking on my office door wanting more overtime because they overextended themselves. So with the fire service and police departments being so young, people not being good at budgeting, just different generations, like we have to help them work through those budgeting issues and have a plan on controlling their debt.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. I don't know, most people probably won't agree with this. taking out a loan to buy a car or truck, most people view that as good debt because it's an asset, right? On a traditional balance sheet when you're taught in school, a vehicle is an asset. I would differ from that because it's typically depreciating over a number of years and it's worth less than what you bought it for. So I would classify that as a bad debt. Alternatively, though, if you just had a lump of cash, say 20, 25, 30, 35,000, and you bought a used car one time, now that's an asset, right? Because at the end of the day, you can sell it. You have no reoccurring costs to it from a monthly loan, and you don't have interest costs. So again, it's getting a little granular on what's good versus bad debt, but just try to keep that in mind. And if you can defer bad debt for a year, 2 or 3 years, like the classic new recruit that buys a brand new truck within the first 3 months, it drastically increases the probability of your retirement income that you'll have once you pull the plug.
So as all 12 of the Fireman Kenny Show loyal listeners know, we often deal with statistics and some of the AI-generated statistics from Google. Let's talk about written financial plans. So as of early 2025, only 36% of U.S. households have a long-term financial plan. In mid-2024, a Schwab survey also found that only 36% of Americans have a written financial plan. So let's talk about written financial plans. What do you guys recommend, and why should someone have a written financial plan?
Yeah, Kenny, this is my 26th year in the business. I think those statistics always hover around that low number. Maybe they bump up a few percentage points or down year over year. But it's like anything, if you can't really monitor or have success unless you measure something, and I would advocate that everyone should have one. The reality is that that's not the case. Money is this taboo topic in our society that doesn't really want to be talked about, and it's never even really taught, even on a grade school level or high school level. And that's been a huge issue of mine for over 2 decades. I think we should embrace the topic. We should talk about it. As a public safety worker, that's transparent, right? That's public knowledge how much money you make. So let's embrace that and let's really build for a financial secure future based off of that. And the first thing you have to do is write it down. Whether it's even just a piece of paper and a pen, that's how I started. I never really used Excel spreadsheets or fancy software. I just literally wrote down my expenses and I wrote down my income, saw they didn't match and said, shit, I need to do something about this, right? And then the next thing that comes is good habits. How do you affect that? Those are the daily actions you need to take, but you at least need to start with writing it down.
I think these conversations need to be had within the public safety community because the people that we're hiring, they're just so passionate about their job. They just want to be good at it. And I think it's important that we have these conversations because, Kenny, through my entire career, you did as much time as I did, this wasn't a topic, and it could have been. And I think if it is more of a topic and people learn what they should and shouldn't be doing, the success rate at the end of the career is going to be better for people.
So there's a number of people that may feel that there are barriers to planning. So those without a financial plan, the most common reasons are not having enough money, so 43%, feeling it's too complicated, 25%, or not having enough time, 21%. So let's talk about how people can get over feeling that there are barriers to their financial planning, which is probably one of the most important things that they would really need to do.
Yes, not having enough money. I think that's a society issue. Everyone's benchmarking themselves against something, right? Whether it's your next door neighbor or your fellow firefighter, and you look at what they have from a tangible perspective, right? You don't walk around with your bank statement or your investment statement tattooed across your head. What you do walk around with is that new truck or that car that's pretty prevalent that everyone can see. And so by that, they're measuring their level of success relative to someone else. Little do you know, there's a classic study when I went through school, The Millionaire Next Door, right? That's a great book. Everyone should read it. Last name of the author, Stanley. It's those quiet millionaires in our country that don't have a lot of tangible goods, the brand new car, the big house, that are doing very, very well financially, and they have good habits. So I would stop comparing yourself to somebody else because they're not walking around with their 457 statement tattooed to their head. Maybe you should ask them, what's in your 457, and see how quickly they shut up.
And there's so many people that I come across that we get in this conversation and they're like, well, I just don't have enough money. I don't want to waste your time. And quite honestly, those are the individuals that probably need the most help, that need really this exercise done so they can understand where they're at and how they can maybe change some things and tweak some things to make the results better for themselves.
So now we can talk about statistics related to savings and debt. So the savings rate in 2024, Americans saved an average of 4.4% of their income. Emergency savings, as of 2024, 27% of Americans had no emergency savings. Household income in 2023, the average before-tax household income was $80,600. And problematic debt, 38% of households carry revolving debt, including credit card debt. So let's talk about the mindset that people have and how they can get away from not having savings and especially not having an emergency savings.
Yeah, Kenny, that's been a constant problem of having emergency savings for individuals forever. And unfortunately, I think that's going to continue to be the problem for our society. Nobody wants to delay gratification, right? That's not how our society is built. And there's this natural statistic that economists and money managers watch. When this country goes into a recession, what's the first group of buyers that lead them out of this recession? It's consumers. The U.S. consumers make up 2/3 of our economy. They lead us in and out of recessions. And then if you couple that with our generations, you look at baby boomers that are retiring, they want to spend money, right? They want to go on vacations, cruise ships, airports, they want to go out to dinner. You look at millennials, they want to spend money, they want a new iPhone, they're not produced to savings and their thoughts. So you look at just raw consumerism. Our society is trained to spend money. We're trained at a very early age. It's not save first, it's spend first. And until you change that, the emergency savings accounts, the investments, the retirement income will always come secondary. And it's habits. You know, it's easier to go into Starbucks and buy a $7 cup of coffee than it is to go to the grocery store and buy a bag of coffee beans and make it yourself. Convenience overrides consumerism, and then consumerism kicks in and people buy stuff.
And I think sometimes it takes maybe a third party to help you sit down and look at where you're spending your money or where you possibly can save. Prime example, young couple gets married and they each have their own separate checking accounts, and they don't realize until someone points it out that they're both paying for the same subscriptions to Netflix, YouTube, but they didn't realize it until someone actually helped them. Another example is people get into the fire service and they might have had a career before and they were paying Social Security. Now the department that they work for, that Social Security isn't being paid. So their check is at 6-7% more, and they can take that money and actually put it in their 457. When you start looking at things in a different perspective, we can help maybe find ways to save money.
So when we're talking about confidence in retirement, in a 2025 survey, 35% of American workers felt very confident about retiring on time, while 33% felt somewhat confident. Retirement savings, 58% of American workers feel they are behind on their retirement savings, and we talk about savings by generation. So based on a March 2025 Fidelity data, average retirement savings vary significantly by generation. So millennials only have about a $67,300 average on their 401k balance, Gen X $192,300, and baby boomers about $250,000. So let's talk about the importance of planning for your financial future, including things like planning for inflation and planning for reduced income in your retirement years.
Yeah, thanks, Kenny, for bringing that point up. There's a lot to unpack here. I guess the first thing I would say is saving too much. This is my 26th year in the business. I've never seen a retirement calculator that says you've saved too much money. Secondly, we often get asked across our whole team, when can I retire? That's a relative term. It has nothing to do with age. It has nothing to do with the amount of money you have. It has to do with lifestyle. What type of lifestyle do you want to have in retirement? The really cool thing that I get to see is in public safety, law enforcement, and fire service, you have a pension, and that pension acts as an anchor for you. And so discretionary lifestyle, the stuff you want to do, the vacations, the boats, the houses, the cabins up north, whatever you want to do is discretionary. And that's what the bucket of the 457 is for. And so if you understand how to structure that, you may or may not have to save as much as you think. It depends on what type of lifestyle you want in retirement. We look at this across, kind of the new recruits. What do you want to do when you retire? And they're like, well, we don't know. We just started our career. We have 20, 25 years. Yes, but you're going to be a millionaire. And they kind of look at us like, what are you talking about? Because they don't understand how valuable that pension is. So now, if you want that extra new house or boat when you turn 55, that's the goal you should be saving for in your 457 as a down payment. So we need to tangibilize this, what retirement really means and what type of lifestyle you want and exactly what you want, knowing that that changes and we review that over time. But you have to understand that it's all about lifestyle. How many people do you know that are sitting next to you that live a lifestyle that is what you would call conservative or boring, right? And they're happy. Those that are out there buying the new boat and, traveling the country, maybe they can afford it, maybe they can't. You don't know their lifestyle. Again, their retirement number's not tattooed to their head. They might be over their head in leverage or debt. So start quantifying and thinking about the exact lifestyle you want and making that a goal.
And I think having a plan and understanding your benefits and how they work as early on as possible is important, because that goalpost changes, right? You get hired in your early 20s, whatever it is, and you're like, all right, I'm going to do a full career at 53 years old. Well, then sometimes things happen, right? You're looking at getting hurt outside of work. You're looking at ordinary disability. You're looking at getting hurt at work. You're looking at duty disability. There's a lot of things that move that goalpost. You just get to your 50s and go, my body just can't take it anymore, physically, mentally, whatever it is. Then you start looking at, all right, what does it cost if I want to retire early? Or let's flip it to the positive. You get a promotion and you never thought you were going to be a battalion chief or a chief. All right, now I'm just riding in the buggy. This is great. Now I prolong my career. There's a lot of things to take into consideration, not only professionally, but personally with your family as well. People end up getting sick family members, getting divorced. Those are all the bad things. But, there's also, positives that can happen. And that's why it's important to have a plan and be able to pivot when you need to.
Yeah, Mike, you brought up a really great point that I hadn't thought about before when we were doing plans for pre-production. Let's talk about dealing with either yourself when you're talking about injuries, illnesses, or death, or of a spouse, injuries, illness, and death, and what you can do when either you or your spouse loses an income either temporarily or permanently, and how you can adjust to make sure to make up for that loss of income.
So yeah, like one of those scenarios that we threw out, those aren't really planned on, right? Like getting hurt outside of work and then having to look at what does ordinary disability look like? What kind of income am I going to have? And duty disability, what does that mean? How do I apply? There's a lot of young union leaders across the country as well, right? As the departments are young, the union leaders are young, and they don't understand the benefits. And that's why it's important to have resources such as Anew Advisors that we can help with that, because we have relationships with, example, Steve Wilding, who can help us work and navigate and help those members.
We just ran through a real life scenario of this. We had a firefighter that was in his late stages of his career, and he had to take a breathing test and didn't pass, and it was kind of a blindside to him and his family. And so there's stuff that comes up, obviously, that you're not going to foresee, and you need to have some type of plan in place, that what-if scenario. You're never going to plan for 100% of it, right? That's just unrealistic. But when you can get through, a month or two of costs where you didn't know you were going to have, that's a game changer in someone's budget and lifestyle. I know everyone wants you to save for an emergency, but sometimes that's just not realistic depending on where you are in your career or your lifestyle or the amount of money you're making. But I used a tool very early in my career. This is instance, I don't really carry a lot of cash on me. I use a debit card. And whether you're getting a cup of coffee or groceries or gas, this tool allowed me to round up my purchase to the next dollar, but just taking those incremental cents and putting it in a small savings account. So I buy a cup of coffee for $2.50. It would literally round that transaction up to $3. It would take that 50 cents and put it into some type of high yield savings account. If you could just ingrain that into your daily habit, you shut your eyes and you open them up, 6, 7, 8, 9 months later, you'll have a little pool of money in case something happens. I specifically used it for my son's sports. So I would pay for the sports bill at the end of the year, knowing that all year long, every time I swiped my debit card, I was rounding up to the next dollar for savings, that I would have some money at the end of the year that I didn't have to quite budget for, but I knew that I would have to pay that expense. I think if you can ingrain habits like that through your daily life and make it automated, that will be the game changer for you. Small increments amount will add up, and you're automating it. You don't have to think about it.
So now we go into estate planning. So who gets what, all of our hard-earned money after we are gone. So overall estate plan completion, a 2025 report shows that only 32% of Americans have an estate plan, which is actually a 6% drop from 2023. A lot of people list their reasons for not planning. The most common reasons people put off estate planning are procrastination, 43%, and the belief that they don't have enough assets to need one, and that's about 40% of the people. Estate plans by generation, so Gen Z, surprisingly, 33% of Gen Z have an estate plan, a higher rate than many older cohorts, and millennials have 62% of millennials lack a will or trust. And then when we talk about will ownership, the number of Americans with a will has steadily declined, with just 24% reporting that they have one in 2025, down from 32% in 2024 and down from 40% in 2016. And then with wealth correction, estate plan participation is significantly higher among wealthier individuals. Over 50% of people with more than $500,000 in assets have a plan. So let's talk about the importance of not only an estate plan, but also if you have a pension that you can pass on within the 180 guaranteed payments. Let's start talking about why that's important and what recommendations you would give to firefighters for their estate planning.
Sorry to chuckle here, Kenny. I hate the term estate plan. I think there's just this aura around that you have to have a lot of money to have an estate plan. I think what's more important is you need to have a will, a basic will. You need to have a healthcare directive. I need to have a power of attorney. If you just broke it down to those three terms and not use the word estate plan, think of how much more realistic of a conversation you could have with somebody. I couldn't think of another community where having a will, a healthcare directive, and a power of attorney is important besides fire service and law enforcement. You risk your lives every single day, multiple times a day. Why would you not have those three documents in place? I can't think of a good reason. So let's take the stigma off of this and stop defining about the dollars that you have or don't have, and about real life examples of look next to you. What's the likelihood of you going through a career of 20, 25, 30 years and not getting hurt? Probably pretty damn low. What's the likelihood of, as a police officer, not getting shot at? Probably pretty damn low. Why would you take the risk of not having those three documents and putting that pain of your family through that, of not being able to make decisions when they most need to make them?
So a lot of our listeners out there may not understand the investment vehicles that are available to them. So like, let's say stock ownership, the percentage of Americans who own stock is directly tied to income and education. And I want to just say that I think I did pretty well in the stock market in 09 and 10 when I was buying stocks at rock bottom prices after the recession started. And the big thing is to buy low, sell high. And then I'm riding that out and sold some stuff now in anticipation of a recession. High income households, so $100,000 plus, 87% own stock. College graduates, 84% own stock. Lower income households, less than $50,000, only 28% own stock. And general investing, younger generations are starting to invest earlier, though older generations still have higher investment participation rates. So let's talk about what vehicles are available, including stocks, bonds, and any other vehicles that people can buy to make wealth.
Yeah, Kenny, that's a great point. I think you got to look at the vehicle, right? So I kind of look at this and say to myself, how can we best use an analogy to help educate everyone on what investments are and how to use them? When you have a house, you have multiple rooms in a house. Some people have a 2-bedroom house, a 3-bedroom house. Some people have a den, some people don't. Some people have a in-home office, some people don't. The point is you have a house. And so when you look at the house, that's really a registration. Is this a taxable registration? Is this a tax-deferred registration? Are you using it efficiently? As employed, you have the opportunity to put money in through a payroll deduction. And you need to use that. And there's two ways to use it, and I think this is a large miseducation, whether you're early in your career or late in your career. When you put money into your 457 plan, it either goes in pre-tax or after tax. The pre-tax obviously grows tax deferred. When you take it out, you get taxed. And there was this argument for years that say, put it in pre-tax because when you retire, you'll be in a lower tax bracket. What we're finding is that dealing with first responders, you have a pension. So the likelihood of you being in a lower tax bracket when you're older is pretty darn close to zero. We're $36 trillion in debt in this country, right? This is not a political statement. At some point, you're going to feel that tax bracket hit you. So the likelihood of taxes going down when you retire are low. You can put it in after tax in what's called a Roth component of your 457. That grows tax-free as long as you keep it in there 5 years and reach age 59 and a half. So why would you not want to pay for something down the road tax-free? We've had inflation. We've had 25% inflation over the last 5 years in almost every good and service that you're consuming. The likelihood of that getting cheaper is zero. So if you take a distribution out of your 457 and you get hit with Fed and state taxes, on the low side, you probably just gave yourself a 15% hair clip, right? So if you didn't have to pay the 15% in taxes and you had money in a tax-free bucket like a Roth, you just gave yourself a raise in retirement. The likelihood of your cost of living in retirement going down is close to zero. So you got to find ways to offset that. You got to use a Roth, and you got to use different investment vehicles that create tax-free income. Once you open that house, if you will, and you start looking at the rooms inside your house, those are the specific investments, whether it's a stock, a bond, a mutual fund, an annuity, a rental income. Those are all the different types of vehicles you can invest in, and you got to find something that you understand and that you can get educated on and you feel comfortable that will meet your goal. Sometimes it's analysis by paralysis. You overthink it, and it doesn't need to be overthought. Everyone knows who Warren Buffett is. That couldn't be a more simpler investment thesis or investment implementation, but yet he's done extremely well. And most of his money that he's made has come after the age of 65. That's a compounding effect. Use time, use compound, use interest, use other people's money. These are just philosophies in life you need to embrace and use.
And when I look at this topic, I think about my career and the people that I work with and people that were giving advice in the firehouse. And Glenn and I joke about this all the time. I don't want Glenn going and putting out a fire because he's not trained in how to do that, right? So I shouldn't be out there trying to pretend like I know what I'm doing with all this stuff. That's why it's good to have a relationship with someone that can give you the right advice, because we all need different advice. Every single person's situation is different, and everybody's understanding of all these different topics that we brought up of how to invest and ways to invest is completely different as well.
Yeah, we have a pretty simple investment thesis at Anew Advisors. We prefer to own individual companies in the form of the stock. We'll use mutual funds, but we collectively prefer not to. There's a lot of embedded costs, hidden fees in there. There's a lot of overlap of investments. It can be very inefficient over longer periods of times. We want companies that are doing well financially. We're monitoring balance sheets and income statements. We're looking at cash flow. We're looking at dividend payments. We're looking at their growth rates. And we'll replace companies from time to time in our portfolio that don't meet our metrics. And then lastly, what's different about us than most investment firms is we have a demographic overlay. We believe in that consumption I talked about. Yes, the U.S. consumes a lot of goods and services, sometimes at the detriment of their own budgeting as well as at the detriment of their own savings. But then you got to reverse that. You got to look at that and you got to say to yourself, if somebody's buying and continuing to buy this good or service, how many people are buying it? You glue together baby boomers and millennials, it's the two largest generations in our country. It's the two largest generations in the world. That's a lot of consumption going on. Follow the money. Find out what they're consuming, how they're consuming it, get in front of the curve, buy the goods and services that are being produced to them, and then monitor the financials.
All right, well, this has been a really great discussion on finances and financial planning. So if somebody wants to get a hold of somebody at Anew Advisors to be able to get into their financial investment plans, how do they contact you?
Yeah, I'm going to take this, Mike. So Mike Bongiorno is the director of our fire services, business development officer, relationship manager. I made a very conscious decision to have representation of someone that's walked in your shoes. I think you need to have a conversation with Mike first before you even talk to myself or my colleagues or the rest of our team from an investment perspective, because you're going to ask some questions that I'm not capable of answering. As a firefighter, you're going to want to know some questions, and Mike's going to tell you straight. I love this model that we built because Mike has a world of knowledge. He's walked in your shoes. He has 28 years of fire service experience. He's going to tell you, yeah, that makes sense, or no, that doesn't. And so, we can't help everyone because they might not need our help. And Mike's that buffer. Mike's going to be like, hey, we're probably not a good fit for you. You don't need us. We can't provide the service you need, but we'll find an outlet. And if he thinks it does make sense, he'll connect you with one of our teammates, and we'll start having a general conversation, and we'll help understand exactly where you're at.
Yeah, and if you need to get in touch with me to set up an appointment, my phone number is 414-520-8589. You can give me a text, give me a call. We can set up a meeting. Our office is in Wauwatosa, but we do a lot of meetings via Zoom. With us growing as we are, we're in 8 different states now. So we're very well vetted, and we have building trust more and more every single day in what we do and how we do it and why we do it.
So I'd like to thank Mike and Glenn for their time today. So do you guys have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, thank you, Kenny. My final thought is this. They always say the best time to do something was yesterday, the next best time is today. Just have the conversation. Our tagline is real conversations, real results. We get pretty candid pretty fast. You might like some things we say, you might not. It just depends on where you are, but we're going to be honest and we're going to be truthful about it. The other thing that we try really, really hard to do is take the complex decisions off of your plate and automate it. I'm a firm believer in automating things and providing good habits and setting that model. So if we can help you do that, that's where we're going to start.
For me, Ken, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for this opportunity to be on this podcast. The relationship that we have with West Bend is phenomenal. It is truly like an example of how we work with a local, or how we should work with a local, and how they should work with us, utilizing every resource that we have. So I do appreciate that. I think you come from a fine fire department in Union. So thank you very much for having us.
We would like to thank Mike Bongiorno and Glen Colwell from Anew Advisors for the interview on National Financial Planning Month. For more information on National Financial Planning Month, you can visit cfp.net. Join us on our next episode when Bryce Hicken and Brennan Bushke from New Dog's Old Tricks are guest hosts. WPLG 715, Fireman Kenny is returning to quarters.
They answer the call to be there for you whenever needed. Horwath Family Builders proudly salutes our first responders. Here's another important message on Milwaukee's Hometown Rock.
I'm Battalion Chief Walter Leininger with the Caledonia Fire Department. Did you know heating equipment is the leading cause of house fires? On average, these types of fires cause 500 deaths, 1,300 injuries, and over $1 billion in property damage each year. When heating your home this winter, keep anything that can burn at least 3 feet away from your space heaters, wood stove, fireplace, and even your furnace. If you're using a portable heater, turn it off when you leave the room or your garage, and never use your oven to heat your home. Following these safety tips will help keep your home safe during this winter season. 96.5 WKLH and Horwath Family Builders are proud to salute our first responders. Get more information and links to first responders throughout Southeast Wisconsin online now at WKLH.com.